Good morning. I would like to welcome Jack Ricchioto. Jack is a Cleveland based author, teacher, and coach. He began his career in community behavioral health and has since trained and coached urban and rural hospital executives, nurses, and physician leaders, as well as providers and staff across service lines, departments, and sites. He has also worked with companies and nonprofits globally across 24 industries. With a graduate degree from Goddard College, he has taught topics like leadership, storytelling, personal growth, entrepreneurship, and planning in a variety of undergraduate and postdoctoral programs. He is the author of 25 books, including his recent release, The Poetry of Human Emotion, a science based guide to emotional well being. Let's go ahead and turn this session over to Jack.
Thanks, Erica. So welcome to session two. Just to recap on session one, those of you who saw that, if you didn't get a chance to see it, definitely look at that one also. We talked about the fact that the new brain science, much of which has come to us through Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University in Boston, but the new science has really turned the whole notion of well-being on its head and also the practices. As it turns out, emotions and feelings don't happen to us, they happen by us. They're not triggered by situations. Our brain creates them in the moment and creates different ones every time we have a different experience or different moment. Our brain creates a new emotion, a new sense of feeling in order to make sense and meaning out of the experience and to prepare our body for action. That's really the purpose of emotions, is to create meaning and preparation for action. So our brain is constantly predicting things, and through those predictions creates the emotions. If we want more emotional well-being, what we need to do is compose a wider range, a wider variety of emotions. And we do that through language. And the recipe we offered was a three-part recipe of we put an emotion together. Instead of just saying we're sad or overwhelmed or stressed, right? We talk about what's true. It's the feeling when this is true, when this might be true, and it's a feeling of liking something or something we would like to have, or we would like to know or see or do. So it's those three pieces. Anytime we just add more language to describe the situation, anytime we make emotions more granular or situation specific, they become more meaningful. And what that means, the significance of that is that they become quieter. The emotions that bother us the most and that take over our lives and interfere with our well-being are loud emotions. They're not necessarily unpleasant. So we're not trying to get rid of the unpleasant. We're trying to quiet all of them so that we have more room to suffer less and enjoy more. So what we're doing today in this webinar is we're taking the next step into how do we support others who are struggling. So these could be our patients, our families, our coworkers, our friends, anybody who's struggling, in a small way, situationally, or people who have had years and lives of struggle. So we're going to talk about a few things that, again, correspond completely with the new science. So I did a book called Simple Listening a few years ago, and simple listening is one of the most powerful ways to get into the space of supporting others. But before I get into it too much, I want to start off, Erica, with whether you have any questions.
Jack, when someone comes to me to talk out their feelings, I am the type of person who wants to engage in conversation and provide feedback. However, sometimes the other person just wants a listening ear. How can I be that listening ear? How can I develop good listening strategies and techniques?
Yeah, so what happens is that as soon as someone talks to us or we're talking to someone, our brain goes crazy. So people talk, let's say the average person talks at 200 or 400 words a minute. Our brain is designed to listen at around 2 or 3,000 words a minute. Okay, so you do the math, right? So you're like, oh my God, my brain wants to, it's like ready to do all kind of stuff. While this person, especially if they're slow talking, you're right, and you say, I feel this sense of like antsiness. Well, that's your brain saying, I want to hear 3,000 things, not just 200. And so what happens is easily our brain fills in the gap with distractions, or we look at our phone, right? Why is that? Because that's how our brain is wired, right? It wants to be busy. We start judging people. We start thinking about, we have all kind of judgments and thoughts that come up. So there's three kinds of listening that cause people to not feel heard, and they're pretty common. And then we'll talk about simple listening, which causes people to feel heard. The significance of feeling heard is when people feel heard, their feelings and emotions become quieter. Okay. And I just want you to notice that people are, just outrageously filled with emotion. And and we start to really listen to them, and we start to see them quiet down, and they actually get to a place of quiet. Right? Why is that? Is it because they got their emotion out? Well, emotions, they don't live in the brain, so we can't get them out. We can't hold them in. Our brain just keeps producing them. But making people feel heard, helping them feel heard, creates that meaningfulness. Okay, so the three kinds of not listening that makes people not feel heard. Selfie listening, right? So I ask you how your weekend was. You say, I went to see friends. And I immediately, you don't even say anything else after that. I immediately say, oh my God, I saw my friends. Oh, it was just, and I spend the next 5 minutes talking about myself. That's selfie listening. Solution listening. One of your friends, has to move and it's terrible. It's during the COVID. And I say, listen, this is what you should do. Okay. That's solution listening. Again, you should not feel heard. The third kind is surface listening. And that's responding with some kind of generalization. Usually the words awful and awesome enter into. So you say, I was able to, get to the lake last weekend, right? And have, oh my God, that's so awesome. That's so awesome, right? And what's really interesting about that, it's so colloquial for us to talk that way, is that it really shuts you down. You're like, well, should I go on? I don't really guess I don't have to because I've been declared awesome, right? Or my experience. Now you might go on, but you don't feel inclined to. You don't feel heard by me. So these are that's called surface listening. Simple listening is listening with two things. It's listening with curiosity and listening with validation. So when I'm listening to you, you tell me you had a hard day. And what you're doing in simple listening is you're giving your brain what it wants. You're imagining. You're imagining what a hard day could be. Okay, so I imagine this version, imagine another version, and you're still talking. Now I'm not missing anything, right? Because again, I can multitask and still, I can do six things in my head and still hear everything you say, or at least two things in my head. So what happens is I say to myself, I'm thinking, well, it could be this kind of hard day or that kind of hard day. And what that does is it stimulates my curiosity. And that flows into questions, that flows into curiosity for you. So I might say, is it the kind of hard day where you just want to do something soothing at the end of it, right? You just want to get in a tub or eat chocolate for 4 hours, or, right? Or go do, just be in the woods alone for a minute. What is it, that kind of hard day? And you're like, well, no, it was the kind of hard day when, and then you describe, right, the emotion. But you're feeling heard, right? Because attention is care. You feel attended to. And you literally are, because I'm giving you the attention and curiosity, which is the purest form of attention. Validation is basically saying, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, right. And then you say, well, then at the end of the day, something else happened. I felt great. That makes sense. You can just turn on a dime. It happens, right? So again, it causes you to go from feeling crazy to feeling sane. Right. And that's what emotional well-being is: the sense of sanity, the sense of realisticness. Um, how does that sound? Does that raise anything for you?
So, Jack, I have a friend and she is a bedside nurse in the ICU. She's had several COVID patients pass away. She is struggling with patients dying alone, so she feels that she needs to be at the bedside every time. But this is wearing on her. She is hurting. How can I help her?
Yeah. So now I'm picturing all many different ways. I'm kind of going through my head of being at bedsides, right, and being with and talking to people at bedsides and so on. A good friend of mine is a chaplain here in Cleveland in one of the hospitals, and we've talked in great detail about his experience holding iPads, with families and so on. And so I'm allowing my mind as she's talking to go through these different scenarios of what hard feels like, right? And I might come out with a question of, do you lose consciousness of all the support people behind you in those moments? She says, sometimes I do. Okay. So that's a very tender moment. It's a moment of her feeling heard through that curiosity. What I want to do now is um, I want to share the recipe. This is the recipe we talked about in the first webinar. Um, I want to share the recipe that we could use in listening. And so what you could say to her is, what's true for you in those moments? What's true, right? What's real? Okay, what happens? And what else is true? Okay, and have her name as many things as possible. What might be true, right? Well, it might be that I'm not doing enough. What else might be true? Well, it might be true that I am doing my best. That might be true, right? So again, you're expanding that emotion. And then is there anything you like in those situations? Is there anything you would also like in those situations? Right? So that's the beauty. Okay. So the this what we call the recipe, which is again based in the science, gives us a chance to structure our listening. Right. Again, you can see through curiosity. And then the beauty of this is also the validation, right? That makes sense. I would feel that way also. Okay. Validation is the opposite of agreement or disagreement, by the way. Okay. So instead of saying, yeah, it's terrible, those hospital administrators, right? They're the worst people on the planet, right? For whatever. Or disagreement, of no, you're doing a great job. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, right? So it's really the disagreement invalidates, right? The disagreement invalidates. The agreement also invalidates the truth of their experience. That's why the recipe is so important. Which leads into the last piece, and this again gets into more of the compassion and empathy. So this is the idea of that's all you can do. So another question, Erica, might be that what are you expecting of yourself in this situation? Right? You're a mom with two kids. You got to take care of everything. Right? At work, you're being called on all the time. Right? People want to cry on your shoulder. You're running out of shoulder. You got, you need some self-care time. What are you expecting of yourself? And that question creates a shift in their mindset, right? It starts to get them to experience a different emotion. It's a shift because they're starting to language their felt experience differently, right? And that's a shift from their feelings to new emotions, right? To expand the emotions as we've been talking about them. And then we could ask, what's the absolute most you can do, right? Well, I can only give my kids, X hours, X minutes a day. That's it. And I'm like half there. So half of me can give them an hour and a half a day. Is that the most you can do? Yes, that's the most I can do. You're going to see a shift in their body language, right? You're going to see a shift in that. They're going to feel that shift. So validation is validating the realistic truth of their capabilities and the value of their contributions. Your kids are so lucky, right? And here's the reasons why. Some paraphrases: you're doing all you can do. That's all you can do. I grew up Italian, and I I share this with a lot of people in my family, where emotional well-being has actually been pretty strong. I have come from a background of pretty emotionally intelligent people, and I remember growing up and hearing my grandparents and their generation say, "What are you going to do?" Right? Somebody talk about some problem or tragedy, and people would talk about it, and the conversation always ended with that. It's like, what are you going to do? And people are like, yeah, right. Yeah, we're gonna, right. Let's focus on what we can do, right. So that's that idea. Once we have that compassion, that's all you can do, and the self-compassion. This is all I can do. It helps us to get to that place of emotional well-being. So, just to wrap up, Eric, anything else?
Jack, when is the proper time to jump in and help, or should I always just listen?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. So obviously we've been really, simple listening, using the recipe, validating the truth of their experience. Is there a time when help is important? Yes, and and one of the more elegant ways to do that is with the question of, would you like some ideas? I have some thoughts. Yeah, I would like your thoughts. Is now a good time, or maybe, we're going to talk later too. That's fine too. No, now is fine. Or you know what? Later would be great. Very simple. It's just a shift in our language. It's asking permission rather than imposing. Okay. And again, it helps people feel a sense of agency, right? And agency is at the core of our well being. Again, thank you, Erica, for joining me today on webinar 2 of 2. It's been a pleasure and a delight and an honor.
Thank you, Jack.